Jimmy, where are you? Welcome to the fourth video where I have not a mousetrap in front of you, but essentially a Rubik's Cube of trend lines. So let's start off with the data as it stands. We are essentially right here in the structure, which is horizontal resistance, and we are also understanding how boring it can be to be an investor of such a coin. But that's why we search for data. So let's get to it. Let's look now at this circular point here on my KDJ chart. We have essentially what is a pivot point of change, and you'll see that with the trend line. And again, if you go across here, you see another point where the trend lines cross, and these are the gray lines, and the black bands start to push up. This is all relative to buyer flux. And I basically want to point out that these are breadcrumb trails left by our market maker, yours truly, whoever it be, Jimmy Who, Jonathan Ha. Doesn't matter where they are. All they care about is this, the harvesting to reap. So if you look here, you can see this anomaly here where essentially we dip down and there's not much data in the candles. We actually start pushing down more even though we push up, and that's because essentially they were getting ready for this big push, which you witnessed, may have witnessed if you got in early, for the mini rally which we've successfully got to the horizontal resistance of. So as you can see, every time these black bands essentially meet and cross with the other yellow and cyan, you essentially get what is an explosion, right? It's essentially something that creates a reaction, and that's just seller and buyer flux. So if we just move on over here and we see the structure changes as the KDJ essentially meets, and you can think of it like, a rubber band stretching more and more and more and more and more and more and more. There has to be a reaction as it essentially goes flying away, and we start to get this mega sort of push up, and hope is in the air, and suddenly we get these candle structures on the 3 daily which are essentially considered bearish. But ye of little faith, understand that these ash lines, and we're going to call them ash lines because Ash likes to draw these trend lines, and they're very representational of the future. They are essentially our looking glass of what's to come and what's to be to be. So essentially, if we just see here, it pushes up and we have these pivotal points where they cross, and that's where essentially even the price action is predicted as well. So the same thing occurs here, the same thing occurs here, and I'm sure that we have lines that will correlate if we start crossing here, which will be in future videos, and we'll be at the Jimmy Who resistance point, and everyone will be sort of thinking, thank goodness we're out of that range, because it's sending everyone to sleep. But hold tight, because we're going to look at another chart. And also, just before I move, as you can see in the particular trend line here crossing down, you've got the black line pushing up, and it's so ready on the 3 day to meet. So we're very close to another move. And on another chart, you'll see why I'm even more bullish, which will be now. Okay, so imagine this guy is our market maker, and he's essentially telling us to be excited through what is considered price action. He pushes it up into A, and this is represented by the cyan candle. But there's one thing you should notice as well. We have this seller volume which pushes down and essentially creates a price reaction. So when the sell goes up, the volume and the price action goes up as well. So we essentially get pushed up into the structure, and we range across, and we think, we're going to push, it's going to be interesting, there's going to be some action. But no, Biden comes in and he's like, I need to essentially say that I'm going to attack the wealthy, or the future wealthy, which could be, yourself in the future, by around potentially 57%. This caused a market stir, and again, this is speculation. And also we had the Coinbase news, so we pushed all the way down and we went back into this essentially this noisy consolidation area. And there was hope that when we crossed here there would be a push, but we ranged again because of all the uncertainty. So one thing to take on note is we have secured enough price action in order to actually hold what is considered a bullish range, and I've represented this with B. Essentially, we will have another injection, which is very similar to A, that will push the price action, and you'll see this as well very clearly. If I take my hand right here, you'll see it when it crossed here, the sell and price action pushed down, and essentially it became not volatile, but the support allowed it to be, the rise of the phoenix has to happen by being supported by the ground. So we're back to the OBV chart, which it can be very confusing to read, because it looks like some child's basically gone over and put crayons all over it and red and greens, and what the hell am I looking at? But the major thing to look at is this point here. We use the terminology for watermelons when you're selling early and you're scared and you're thrown out. But our market maker here in pretty essentially pinkish red, right? He essentially said, right, I'm gonna allow you to have excitement. I'm gonna boost the market. I'm gonna get your hopes up, push your dreams into a dream state of hope, and I'm gonna range you across. I'm gonna give you the impression that I'm gonna put enough volume into the market, but then I'm gonna also use FUD, and I'm gonna take us all the way down. But the good news, guys, is we're on the second layer, and what I want to give you here is a representation essentially of soil. Within soil or farming, any farmers out there know that you have to nurture the soil. You can't just go ahead and essentially pillage and take the whatever vegetables or goods that you need to sell. You need to essentially nurture it. So within this area, you've got a build-up still of incurring buyer flux. It means it's going up. To really simplify it, it means it's going up. And we've held this second layer. And what's really interesting is we're hitting this pivot point here, which is essentially the trend line where change has to occur. So one injection is all it takes to push up. And that's why it's so interesting to look at the OBV, which is on balance volume. It's the total volume which keeps the candles that you see so relevant and pushing up and holding. And we're going to demonstrate this in other charts. Not this one, because we've obviously, we've gone and seen it. So we're essentially going sideways. You don't need a brain surgeon or rocket scientist to tell you this. We're sideways. But the good news is we are hitting a point where the volume is so low that people are going to be so bored, and so is the market maker. And to reference this, you have to understand that bots buy your fear. And if there's not enough fear, if there's not enough volume, there's going to be essentially a tumbling effect of the total factor of the candles. So the candles are essentially going to they're basically not going to support, and they're going to drop down, and our market maker is just going to basically give up. But the retail is basically on, this is a good opportunity. I'm going to hold. Many people are thinking this is the bottom, and why not? We essentially, if you saw my previous video, we've harvested already for this amount of time. I mean, I'll just demonstrate it across here. Literally, just look at this amount of time that we've been harvesting. Just imagine the amount of time that's been for the bots to buy and sell, buy and sell, buy and sell, and for this chain reaction to happen. So the most important thing is we are creating, when we lose this volume, and you'll see this on this chart. Yeah, those are bears, not penguins, and that's our major resistance point once we push up again. And as you can see, it literally was the resistance point, and that's why I've put the trend line there. We have what is essentially the KDJ again. So let me just, before I bore you to death, right, understand this. When these bands push, an explosion happens. So just imagine some Michael Bay film that essentially, Transformers or whatever, just literally non-stop movie action. That's what you tend to see when these bands cross. They're magic. They give us some emphasis of what happens in the future. So just bear that in mind when you're trying to read candles. We're ultimately also looking for psychology of the market maker, the bots, the zones that people will give up the most, and several factors that give us reason to push up against horizontal resistance. So what I've done here is I've designed a chart. Very simply put, I've done a chart which represents the total volume pushing on average. This is the on average, which is the orange line, And essentially you can think of A at the starting point, right? A starts you off, right? It's the start of the races, and it's not a very interesting race. We're just going flat. If you look at here, we're just literally going flat. You take the market maker and you see him. He's basically gone, right, I'm going to push it up, build enthusiasm, and I'm going to make you wait and wait and wait and wait. And what are you doing now? You're waiting. So he pushes you up and we go to B. So retrospectively, we have B. And you get that spike again on the orange line, and that's essentially buyer flux pushing. And what happens is, after that, the market maker would love to essentially get you to sell your bag, or any weak hands to let go, because the market maker wants to buy more for the next push. So once B phase finishes, it essentially starts off for the next phase of this OV, which is essentially the volume dying down and the buys and sells reaching a point of, should I stay or should I go? And once that happens, it pushes up and it rotates around just to the C area. And I'll take this hand as well to the C area. You'll literally see at this point, and get that pun right there, C, you see at this point we have another spike, but this spike is greater than, okay? Even though they're very similar in pattern in terms of the total flux, it is essentially a barometer to see when price action occurs. So as you can see, B pushes up and then pushes down, pushes up again to C, C pushes up and pushes down, and where are we? Essentially at D. We're at D point, and on that point we're stuck, and we're at a point on the Ichimoku where it could turn furthermore green, and that's called a Kumo. But what's happening at the moment on particularly this 18 hour is we are looking like we're at a transitional point of change. The market maker just at this point here and here has to decide whether to build up enough volume to get us the pump that we need to get to those 80s area, and again back to that 0.04 thousand TUSD value. So I'm just going to leave that with you to think about as the next coming days happen and price action occurs. Understand that this is a psychological game. This isn't something that everybody can do. This isn't something where you can just hope and pray that something's going to happen, because it's not. You need to understand what is the market maker's plan, and you have to understand what's in the market maker's favor. So on that note, I'm gonna finish off, and thank you guys for watching. Yes, there will be another video to explain further aspects of what comes forward, but essentially you need to understand, if you're bored out of your mind, you should be, because that's when people sell. That's when nothing happens. That's when uncertainty happens. That's when hope fails. But at the moment, we have prime support, and I keep saying that throughout the videos, prime support. And no wonder, because if I just finish off here and I just literally give you a simple rectangle, anyone can do this, simple rectangle, we are on prime support. So don't forget that. So again, thanks for watching the video. Peace out.